Welcome to Rao's IAS podcast. Here we have the very specialist teachers of polity from our very own Rao's IAS. Here Dr. Ankur Sharma from Bangalore branch and Anubhav sir, Mr. Anubhav Sharma. Hello.
Obviously Naweed sir.
Yeah.
Takes law optional in Delhi, and we have someone behind the camera also who refuses to come on the screen. Vaibhav Mishra sir.
So students, this is we are discussing these number of questions. We'll talk about the number from set D. So as to make this very clear. So we have this from set D, questions from polity and governance. So.
Fine. So the first question, of course, is the first question of set D. That is, Delimitation Commission has been constituted by Government of India till December 2023. The question is, how many Delimitation Commission has been set up?
Right. So that would be easy for. And that was covered multiple times. It was in DNS, it was in Focus also.
I'm sure even in your class notes, this is a very basic thing. As in, it's a very basic thing.
The polity booklet also. That is.
Now, so what do you think this question was asked this year?
Delimitation. So it's just around the corner, 2026.
2026, so all the announcement through.
I think the delimitation also taking place, I think, in Jammu and Kashmir.
Absolutely.
Because of the reorganization of the state.
2026.
So
maybe it's something that they know is going to happen.
So again, sir, this question based on current development, but on a very static part.
That's one of the things that UPSC does. It may ask a question from static part, from foundational knowledge, but the roots of it actually goes into what exactly is happening in current issues and current events, right? So we'll move to the second question. The second question is again the second question of the paper. It is with respect to 71st Amendment Act of 1992, Constitutional Amendment Act of 1992, and the question is about what all other languages given the options has been included in the 8th schedule. So we have Konkani, Manipuri, Nepali, and Maithili. Sir, Naweed sir.
So I think I would say not so easy. Because
no doubt
no one is expected to go through exact amendments and which languages that to 71st Amendment Act, 42nd fine, 44th okay, or some other amendments fine, but this one particularly with respect to schedules. But at the same time we have to know, so that is something which we also need to understand, that UPSC, the spectrum which the UPSC has, the umbrella which the UPSC has is much wider, and we cannot say that okay, this cannot be asked, UPSC can ask anything.
They've done this with DPSP also, like which amendment added which part to.
And after that, the amendments started becoming more important, more than the provisions also,
now
right?
They've expanded it to different spheres also.
Yes,
but initially they confined it to DPSP.
So like I think other than Maithili, which was added through 92nd amendment, right?
So the answer is the first, that is Konkani, Manipuri, and of course Nepali. Now, what I believe this question is very interesting is because this question is designed in a way in which it is going to confuse you. So a lot of time what happens is students would want to take an attempt even when they may not be knowing it. And what such a question does is it gives you that impression Nepali to nahi hoga. And that is where they are going to create mistake. I think that was the intent of this question. And generally what students believe, and of course that is right, that Maithili in fact is a part of 8th schedule language, but it was not added in 1992. So again, a way in which you might actually get caught in the trap of UPSC. So yeah, I mean, in that sense, it's one of the tougher questions that we essentially have this year for polity, and very tricky in my opinion.
The source is easy, but remembering this information, that is difficult. And not being confused when you're giving the exam, that makes it difficult.
So what do you suggest for a student? Should they, if they're finding it difficult, should they leave?
See, one of the things that I do in my polity classes, in the first day itself, I say that almost all the questions will actually get covered from the class notes itself and everything that we are teaching in the class, except for one. Because that one question that might be coming in your prelims exam might be something which is absolutely a googly. And there's no reason why you need to get worried about that question. There will be students who know about this. We in fact had covered this in our DNS, in our focus. It's not as if we haven't covered it. Only thing is, students who are preparing for next year should not worry about such questions and change their strategy of preparation in a very massive manner. Just do the basics right. There can be that one question which is very tricky, but that should not be something that must just disturb you or take you away from the co-preparation.
And sir, it's not also expected of the students to attempt everything, right? They have to play the right game there, the right strategy.
and you can't really recommend so much rote learning.
Of course.
Like, remember what 71st standard, remember what...
No, not possible.
That also cannot
It's
be
not possible also. It's not possible.
Absolutely.
So moving on, sir, the next one is
Fourth.
question number 4. Ankur, sir, just...
I would put this... it really depends. It's municipalities. I think everyone should be aware that Part 9 is
But
Part 9.
sir, let's say if I am attempting this question, I know only about municipalities, that yes, 9A added by 74th Amendment.
And
Will I be able to eliminate?
no. So you would need to know.
I'll need at least one more
And
information.
it's not that many parts you have to remember. They have done this in the past, so it is a precedent that they have asked Part 4. They have asked Part.
They were, I think, initially limited to Part 5 or something.
Part 3,
Yeah.
which was fundamental, which was much more famous. But now they have expanded to other parts also. So you do have to remember at the end of the day. And that's why when we start each topic, let's say we started with citizenship, you should know which part. Or we started with emergency, write down which part, because you ended up writing the article anyways. But you have to now remember the part. Again,
Their act comes into picture here.
if you study directly from the Constitution, it does make it a lot easier.
See, one of the things that I always say to students when we cover the polity classes is the fact that one of the things that we must appreciate about the way in which a constituent assembly functioned was the fact they created a constitution in a very logical order. There's part 1 that talks about what is India. There's part 2 that talks about who is an Indian citizenship. Part 3 which talks about what are the rights of an
available.
Indian. In that order, if you actually look at it, there's a logical way in which the constitution has been written. So one of the things that we discussed just now is the fact that UPSC has actually made this year polity to be very general studies. What can be more general than a candidate and aspirant being aware about what exactly is the way in which a structure of the constitution is written? Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4, Part 5. So in that sense, if you think about it, it's not that tough question, but then, as I said, that it can be tricky for the reason this is not the way generally we teach or the students prepare, right? That they are supposed to know like what is Part 9A, what is Part 20, what is Part 22. So yeah, so again, I think bare acts and knowing the general studies part of polity is something which I think has become important.
Parts, remember now.
But difficult.
Yeah, see, if you
So is this a difficult question, easy question? What do you think, sir?
See, it depends on the aspirant, as I said, but I would imagine we would need to not treat it more than a moderate question, more than a medium question. Exactly. It can be taken as easy for people who know, but certainly it can be taken as moderate for most students, I would imagine.
Questions of, it's a rote learned answer. There's no analysis to this, there's no interpretation to this. And if you're going back to rote learned questions, those that have good memory will do well. Those that have struggled with remembering all of this, they won't do.
And
so in that way, it's moderate, and it really depends on your personal.
It also goes slightly against the way in which UPSC has been asking questions. Exactly. So that actually makes it a moderate question more than it actually being very tough.
Yeah.
What do you think about it, sir?
Not tough, but difficult to remember. But like we cannot say कि this is something which is unexpected from UPSC. This is out of a blue question. We can't ऐसा नहीं बोल सकते. But हाँ मतलब if you're writing the exam and if you know Article 368 is amendment but you don't know the part, you need to know. You need to, at least going forward, students should know which part a particular aspect or particular topic is dealt with.
The point is, all of that is when you make them write the notes is dictated. The point is, it's really is a lot of notes that you would had to end up remembering, and this in itself becomes. So if you have good memory, you'll do well. If you don't, then. And
actually, it's going to be tougher for people who are attempting for the first time, more than perhaps people who might have revised it 5-6 times. That might be.
It's sort of a guidance for the future, I think.
True, it is. It's a takeaway. It's a learning takeaway for students and aspirants for next time.
Because 2 marks are important.
Absolutely, sir. 76 पे तो कट ऑफ थी सर लास्ट ईयर. सोचो 2 marks are that important.
Ankur sir, next question. On
interstates.
Yeah, on union list, state list.
So interstate trade and commerce.
I think this is again very bare act specific. I would say, एकदम straightforward.
If you've read from the Constitution, you know it's not, and it's directly.
So are we really expecting students to go through the union list entries now, or the state list entries, or the
interstate trade and commerce? It's also written in Lakshmikant. It's also when you teach in class. That's directly within the part of the union.
I think, but the trick here was not about the interstate trade and commerce, but the trick was the COVID crisis. here.
Yeah, but again, new students would have a difficulty. It's much easier for those that are being given, let's say,
Yeah.
third or fourth attempt. They were there when the COVID was current affairs. Now this
Sir,
is contemporary.
So what do you think about this question, sir?
So
your
my
take?
takeaway is the way in which the first time when I read it, I felt the right or intelligent way to go about it is elimination. So we know for a fact that interstate trade and commerce is not a stateless subject. तो पहला तो गलत हो गया.
So falsify the statements. If you
Exactly,
don't know the
sir.
correct answer, try to know why they're wrong.
Why they are wrong. तो हमें ये तो पता है, तो अब हमारा B, C and D रह गया. Corporate tax again is something
The
which
union,
essentially
sir,
no, it
center
is not a
takes,
state.
it's
तो
not
D
a-
भी चला गया. अब बचा B and C का, right sir? अब interstate migration, logically students can think, if at all you're able to apply the intelligence, it should not be. I'm not saying it's easy for
It's
everyone.
actually taught also when we do Article 19 and 21.
True.
Internal migration and external migration
External.
because of the Menka Gandhi
Menka
case.
Gandhi case.
I think if you've done fundamental rights properly at 19 and 21,
Exactly.
I think you'll be able to answer.
So the idea is that if at all, even if you may not be someone who essentially knows everything about this issue, if you are able to apply your basic understanding of fundamental rights, things that you've studied,
Yeah.
then perhaps with elimination you can sort of get it done.
You can take an informed guess, and
Exactly.
that informed guess would technically come out to be true.
Exactly.
In this case.
Or you can be a person who might have studied about interstate quarantine being a union subject because of the COVID crisis. So nothing better. But yeah, I mean, so it certainly is not an easy one. But depending on how
And I've told you
exactly
that questions
approach it.
do appear easy, at least some of them.
So my
But,
take is that the most intelligent way to go about it is elimination for this question, and hopefully students must have got it right.
Analytical in nature.
It is analytical.
And
As
it
I
is,
said, like, I mean, if you want to eliminate, you
Yeah.
need to have your
Analyze.
analytical ability by which you're eliminating sort of wrong options.
When you have to falsify, you have to have ability to interlink with different
Exactly.
aspects. together.
And that comes down to how well you have understood things and not just mug up things. तो ये important हो जाता है.
Yeah.
Yes.
Next one.
So we have
Next one
question
is
number
This
6.
has somehow become a very famous question with you.
Which one?
Article 21.
UPSC is in love with
Right.
Putta Swami judgment.
Buddha Swami judgment. This is the question which, मतलब अगर if you want to draw a parallel, Buddhism and Jainism of ancient history. मतलब उसपे I right to privacy has become that question. So
I think they asked me last 3-4 years
2022 they asked in prelims. 2019 they asked in prelims. I think 2017 they asked in
when the
mains.
judgment
They've asked
came.
in mains, exactly.
Just after the
They've asked,
judgment,
yeah.
18.
18.
In the mains they are asked.
2017 I think they asked in mains,
Mains.
and 2019 and 2022 in prelims. Now again they've asked. It's not like they've made it difficult. The
Two
question is
topics.
quite
One,
easy.
two topics. I think they have UPSC is asking continuously. One is this right to privacy, and the other one is constitutionalism. This time, I think they have not asked in a different way, but more or less every year we have been seeing that question. You know?
True.
Even this year they've not ended their love affair with money bills.
bill.
Continuously.
ठीक है, it's good for students.
What do you think is the reason behind it, Ankur sir? I mean, the fact that they seem to have this love affair with a right to privacy. What exactly?
Inculcating that right?
It was also in current affairs because of the electoral bond scheme.
Yes, I think that
Because
was.
it became a conflict between Article 19, the right to know,
And right to privacy.
and right to privacy under Article 21. So Supreme Court took the decision that
The
right
two
to know-
fundamental rights had to be judged against one another, and this is where Justice Chandrachud judgment also
Yeah.
became
came
handy.
about. In fact, when you look at it, Article 19 and 21 are two fundamental rights which essentially has been expanding in the last 75 years. And somewhere UPSC has been asking questions around 19 and 21 in this way. But see, what is interesting for me is why exactly it has to be pretty much the same question that they have asked so many times.
They've not made it difficult.
They could have made it slightly different, if not tough. But anyways, right to privacy again.
Sir, you're right actually. As in this analysis or this observation is correct that Article 19 and 21 of course has been expanding and UPSC has been touching this. Last year in the mains, Ankur
They've
sir,
asked.
the question on residence was also asked.
Presidents. Because of the COVID thing.
There was I think
Because-
last year there was a question on
Freedom of
Menka
movement
Gandhi.
they've asked.
Freedom of
on.
movement.
Freedom of movement, they've
Haan,
asked.
freedom of movement.
Exactly, and they have
During the
also asked a
COVID.
question directly on Menka Gandhi a few years back, 2 years back, if I'm not wrong. Right. So
They have
19
also
and
started
21
asking
touch.
about some judgments also now. Yeah.
Any right they expand. The presumption was they would ask on that Ranjit Singh case. But they've not asked. They again went back to Putta Swami judgment. But I think it probably had to do with the electoral bond scheme. The right to know
Yeah, yeah.
voters versus the right of privacy.
Right of the government to withhold that information.
See, one of the things that I always say to students is that in UPSC prelims, a lot of time we are focusing a lot more on tough questions while we are not doing the right analysis of the easy and ordered question. I think it's a blunder on the part of our average aspirant. They're getting this question wrong.
They have to do PYQs. Like in one of the sources,
Of course.
at least do the past 10 years if you can't do the past 20.
Absolutely.
Do all the PYQs. It would get you a sense of how UPSC is asking questions. And there is always repetition. So sometimes they'll ask the question directly like this, but sometimes they'll make one of the options ask the question.
True. So that's question 6.
Next one, sir. Question number 10.
Question 10, sir.
Ethics.
Ethics committee.
Ankur sir is the best one to say on this.
No. I have what to say about this question. It was way too much in the news.
Directly, it can be directly related to the Moitra case.
Pre-prediction, it was there in DNS everywhere. The statements are difficult.
Yes.
The point is, was it an ad hoc committee? So that was
It
not
was,
covered in
but,
Hindu, but you do find it in Compass,
yeah.
you do find it in DNS and other places.
IAS Compass has elaborately
All of
mentioned
it
about,
has. I think the second statement also that anyone can complain. But that person has to complain to a member of the Lok Sabha. So that information is also there. If you go on the Compass website, it's been there for the past 1.5 years. But the statements are difficult. So that would put the question in
Slightly difficult category.
True.
Do you agree, sir?
It is difficult for sure. I mean, if not very difficult, somewhat difficult. I just, one of the things that teachers often say is the fact that whenever you read something in current affairs, always have this eye for or be always curious with respect to terms that you read. So, with respect to what we were discussing, Mahua Mitra case. So, almost in every news item with respect to Mahua Mitra case, we essentially were having this reference of ethics committee. So, I think few of the aspirants, what they must have done is to do a simple Google search with respect to ethics committee. And now these students are getting devoted. So I think that again is one of the takeaways, that if at all you're reading something and you're seeing something frequently, you essentially should have that habit of
knowing
that is
about
inquiry,
it.
right? That spirit of inquiry, one of the fundamental duties.
Curiosity.
It goes back to what you were saying also. Even before the prelims examination, go through the DNS and other places. Because the point is, if you do a Google search, it's a minefield.
It's a minefield.
It's minefield. So
because
if you
DNS
go
is
to a
more
source,
curated, UPSC curated. It's for
if you go
the
to DNS
UPSC.
Compass, it's much more curated.
For the UPSC, by
You
the
get the
UPSC,
exact
of the
information.
UPSC.
And that does make it easier.
Yeah.
That I don't have to do it by myself.
See, I think that is what it means, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that is our job, to make sure everything is in one place for students to sort of study. But still, I believe that spirit of inquiry is important for an aspirant, so that they essentially keep on, because I truly believe that there will be students who have read about ethics committee with respect to a passing reference. They know that ethics committee pada hai, but they never actually care to know more about it. So there will be students, may not be our students, but there will be some good aspirants who know कि यार ये तो कभी ज़्यादा नहीं किया
The first statement itself you don't find. You don't find it in Hindu. You don't find it in the Lok Sabha reports and all.
Because it's the statement is with respect to the whole genesis of ethics committee. Right. Next one, sir.
Next question is about Article 368. I think one of the easier questions. Yep. So it's about, I think we know Article 368 is about how exactly amendment to Indian Constitution can happen. The question is, through Article 368, what are the ways in which we can amend the Constitution? Can we bring addition? Can we bring variation? Or can we repeal any of the provision of the Constitution? Of course, the answer is all of the above.
I think again here anyone would have done a plain reading of Article 368, they would have known about
basic
this.
knowledge
Basic read. I think this is a simple question.
Yes, simple question.
A simple, straightforward
and it comes
question.
from because of the Article 370 judgment also. Because the Supreme Court said that
Yes.
they can amend Article 370 through 368. So within that sense, it was linked to current affairs.
Is there a way in which students can get confused with respect to the language, addition, variation, repeal?
If you overthink, then yes.
If you overthink, right?
I think that's why these three options were given to make them confused.
Confused.
What is the exact meaning of amendment? Or does amendment and Article 368 also includes this, and this? Right.
Is variation different from repeal? Is addition different from variation? Stuff like that, right? I think you can only make a blender out of it. Otherwise, one of the easier questions this year.
Some of the the first paper that came out, somebody has written Article 31 next to repeal. I don't know why, but it's one of the first papers that actually came out on Twitter and everywhere. It's overthinking.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that is also shouldn't do.
Yeah,
And that happens.
that happens.
So, I mean, a lot of times, I think that we it's so easy for us to just sit here and discuss about it. But in that exam room pressure, at times what students do, they overthink and think, yaar, itna aasan nahi aa sakta. See, in that, they start thinking about ghosts which are not there. So that happens.
Next one again, very straightforward, sir. On money bill, which of the following are correct? I think one of the basic questions which
continuously asked.
whenever we discuss in the class, this is what we start with about a money bill, right, sir?
True.
So,
Absolutely.
Again,
I think the only confusion students may have is with 109, 110.
मुझे
So
भी
both of them talk about money bills. 109 talks about special procedure.
See, I think
again, the marginal heading comes into picture here.
Because then you think, is only 110 talking about money bills? That is not the case.
For students who are wondering about marginal heading, it is after the provision, that is after the article, what is written in bold, that is your marginal heading. So this time UPSC has framed a statement based on the marginal heading. I think it's Article 109, sir.
yes.
109 special procedure. Yeah.
In fact, my takeaway was exactly the same as Ankur had said, that the moment you tell to a new aspirant what is money bill, the first thing that comes to their mind is Article 110. So it might
The definition
just be
part.
that they may feel, yeah, ये statement तो गलत है. 109 is not about money bill. 110 is about money bill, right? And I think that is where there is a chance of you committing a mistake. I believe it to be easy,
But it's still easy because if
you go through the
would
statement-
eliminate, then what would happen is A, C, and D would eliminate, and only 2 and 3. Then you would know that this would not be the correct option. If you know
Absolutely.
the fourth statement well, then you would know that
I
it's
think
not the correct.
maximum student might confuse with the fourth option other than the first. Other than the first, let's say if they have to eliminate first also.
Fourth one was actually
something that we emphasize a lot
emphasize
in
on.
the
So
class,
Rajya Sabha, it's not binding upon the Lok Sabha.
Rajya Sabha
their
does not have any power
recommendations.
to speak to money.
So that becomes easy. And if you know fourth is right, you know that.
That's what I'm saying. Ki, agar, if they are sure about fourth, then they would have come to the right conclusion. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Moving further, sir. So this is a very basic thing discussed in the class, also provided through the class notes, right? The next question is, sir, question number 20.
This year, the money bill question is easier than the previous one. Because last year they asked on money bills and financial bills.
bills.
This year's question on money bill is much easier than the previous year.
Overall, when we compare it overall as a section of polity and governance, it's much easier,
This is
much more basic,
Much more basic.
foundational,
Much more general studies.
much more general studies. I think UPSC is back to
Aston
at least giving the students confidence ki if you go through the basics, if you're revising it enough, then you will be able to solve it.
And it's kind of refreshing because every year it was only getting tougher.
Last year, I think
Last year was the culmination point. Unless
Cut-off went
UPSC goes
too
back
low.
to the same trend again next year.
Nothing is predictable about
Yeah,
UPSC, so
sure.
who knows?
So next question number 20 on Northeastern Council. Northeastern Council was established by the Northeastern Council Act 1971. Subsequent to the amendment of NEC Act in 2002, the council comprises which of the following? So it's basically asking about the composition. But here there is a trick. The trick is that in 2002, the amendment itself provides that the president can nominate one of the union ministers and also one of the chairmen. And subsequently, later, the government through a cabinet notification issued notified that the union home minister
So
would be
the one.
would be the chairperson. I think that was done in 2018 or somewhere.
I'm not sure about the.
I just saw on PIB, maybe much earlier. But I think maybe this is where students might get confused that whether the union home minister is part of NEC or not. So
It is difficult within that sense because the act.
yeah, it's
is
very.
union law.
It's from a law
Act says
perspective.
union
If I say going into subordinate legislation is not something which students would think in a general way. Yeah,
And that is just.
unless until they know outrightly, अच्छा NEC में ये सारे members हैं.
I think it might be just overthinking on our part.
I actually feel this question to be.
But sir, is this okay? If it is overthinking, then how can student find this from which source?
I'll take
That
Anubhav sir's advice and say all questions except one. So this would be my
One of
except
those.
one.
See, I clearly believe this is one of the toughest question of polity this year.
Okay.
And perhaps tougher than many of the previous year questions of polity that they have asked, because it is tough for sure. Now, one of the reasons I believe it to be tough is something, at least I don't cover it in my foundation classes. This question, this topic I had covered in my foundation classes. We have covered it in our current affairs. We have covered in our focus
QIP. We have covered in the QIP. I did it
Now-
when I took the prelims
What happens
QIP.
is if you're not covering something, as I said, like money bill is something that gets covered in different ways at different parts across the year, right? But this is not that topic that actually getting covered multiple times. So if you're a very good student, of course you'll be able to manage it.
And
But
what would happen is once you read the composition, you'll get confused with Interstate Council and
Yes.
Zonal Council.
Yes, zonal
Absolutely.
council.
And even if you pick up the Lakshmikant chapter, so last edition they had a complete chapter, but now what they have done is put one paragraph on Northeast Council, which doesn't talk about all of this. It's there in focus, it's there in compass. So there you would get the correct information. But I would find it
it is
confusing whether it should be Union Minister or it should be the Home
No,
Minister.
the provisions are there as such.
provision act
Again,
itself says
the Northeast
Union Minister.
this NEC Act again has been further amended, and now when we go on the India Code, अब उसमें दिया हुआ है. उसमें दिया हुआ है.
So if you're a student,
But again, you have to be very. That's what I was saying. You have to be very specific about. And if you, sir, if you go through the statement here, the question subsequent to the amendment of NEC Act in 2002. So they are asking based on or
Subsequently what happened
or
afterwards.
after the amendment of 2002. So
True. So yeah, as Ankur sir said, one of those questions you should take away something from, something that current is important, but then not worry about too much.
why do you
Because
think,
it
sir,
could
this
be
question was asked?
Why? See, it's one of those questions which does not, I think it's random. At least in my understanding, it's not something we can always say that's a part of current affairs. We can also link it with, if you want, let's say with Manipur. But I think one of those things for which you may know the answer, you may not something for you to worry
There's no
about.
strong reason in current affairs to be asked.
True.
for
Sir,
this particular
again,
question.
you know,
think, sir?
if we go back, I think when I was taking the QIP prelims class, sir, this is 2023. So then something was in news with respect to any council,
Okay.
Northeastern Council. So I researched something. Then I also got to know about the Union Home Minister then. But again, now we are in 2024, and I think whatever I was researching on was in what must have happened in 2022, right? Then I was discussing for 2023. So even back then, in that sense, but again, you can never say. But for this one question, I won't think students should, but go ahead in so much of detail. But they should definitely know about the Northeastern Council.
Only takeaway is take your QIP very seriously. These things are getting covered in QIPs, which is, I mean, very tough question.
But again, this was 2023. So
Maybe so. Move to-
Available
fine.
on YouTube, sir.
what next?
Bit of prohibition. This
नहीं, Nari Shakti.
अच्छा ओके हाँ
Women reservation.
Nari Shakti Vandana. Yes, Vandan. अच्छा.
बताइए सर.
अच्छा so provisions will come into effect from 18th October. That is not true. I think this was clear if you read the papers and everything that it would not come into effect with 18th. It would come into effect, I think, after the delimitation.
After
happens.
delimitation exercise. Yep.
And as far as
So
the
for that, students have to know which Lok Sabha is this.
The number, yes.
The number of Lok Sabha.
True.
Can they-
Which was.
I get confused, to be very honest. So
Yes, we all do.
something.
I think this is 18th, right?
This is 18th. Yes.
This one?
is 18th.
Till 29.
The new government we have 18th. So, what do you think? It's a tough, easy,
Definitely not that easy.
not easy.
Not that easy. But not very difficult if you have gone through because women reservation was in lot of news.
Absolutely,
मतलब बहुत ज़्यादा ही था. तो और this aspect of 15 years, again you have to be very specific. You have to go through
should have
the
revised
details थोड़ा सा.
and even with the third part, this actually is there with the Panchayat and municipalities. So you can make that example that, okay, if I've studied this in Panchayat and municipalities, the same. But again, you have to have the exact information. I remember teaching it in class for Panchayat and municipalities, saying that this is also there in the women reservation.
Women reservation.
But again, we can of course backtrack it, but we have to know exactly what is there in Nari. And one of the confusing part here is the second statement says this will be in force for 15 years after becoming an act. The state The provision says after the commencement. So I think this is the technicality where
The Act in itself says after commencement. So in that way, the second statement would be correct. But again, this line is not there in current affairs. You would have to read
You have
from
to
a
dig deep.
static UPSC perspective booklet to understand that this line is there. Because these lines you would not find in the newspapers and other places.
I mean, I think one thing is clear that this was one of those very important topics that must be covered this year. But at the same time, that, as you said, the way in which the question has been framed, it even for the person who might have studied it,
even the
will get
statement
confused.
is slightly confusing.
It's confusing. The way in which the articulation.
The same thing is with the ethics committee, no? Both of them were
Same.
massively in the news, but the statements that they have formed, those are difficult. And you would have
But
to know.
compared to ethics committee, I'm actually finding this to be slightly tougher. Personally, that I mean, for a student, I think they might be knowing about the Nari Shakti Vandan Abhiyan. They essentially might be knowing about some of the provisions, but this 15-year provision, well, I'm not sure.
does.
तो वो मेरे को थोड़ा सा मतलब लगा, but
And that too after the commencement of the act. Because now the act is there.
commencement of the act, true.
After the act commences.
Anyways, so the next question is again a
Very basic one.
Very basic rate of
I think
provision.
the most basic thing which we
NCERT.
discuss in the class. Huh.
True.
Read the NCERT.
No
I think,
other ways.
One of the previous papers, they asked mandamus, which was actually difficult.
That question was very difficult.
That question was
very difficult. On question
Mandamus they had
mandamus.
asked, no?
Last year?
Yeah.
No, last year?
Last year.
क्या था? मुझे ध्यान नहीं आ रहा.
Who can file for a mandamus,
Mandamus.
basically.
In what
Fine.
cases it would be applicable. That way they have asked.
Okay.
But this one is easy. You can directly
And this
take it
is very
from
easy.
the
This is very basic.
NCERT.
This is very basic. I think this is, if a student does not know this question, they should go back to their basics and revise properly.
See, I tell you why this question is also interesting, because generally students get confused between tertiary and prohibition. So even if you do not have the clarity between the two, you still will be able to get the right answer. Because the question is not of that, right? So yeah. Anyways, the basics of polity. The next question is it is the governor of the state who recognizes and declares any community of the state to be scheduled tribe. A community declared as a scheduled tribe in a state need not be so in another state. So we have two statements. We need to pick which one are correct. Both are correct, both are wrong, or if one is wrong, one is correct. What do you think, sir?
I think straight away Article 342 comes here.
42.
But if anyone knows Article 342, they can straight away say that the first statement is incorrect, right?
Incorrect, true.
So, but when we come to the second statement, their current events or newspaper reading becomes handy, because I think way back it was in the news
2022,
that
sir.
some community was declared as scheduled tribe, and this was the demand that their community have been declared as a scheduled tribe in some state, but in other state it's not. So they want the same status in that sense,
I think
right?
2022, I think they made four
somewhere.
communities in the state. One was Hattis from Himachal Pradesh, and two were from Tamil Nadu. The problem was with the community known as, I think, Sinjia, if I'm pronouncing it correct. So technically they got in Chhattisgarh, but they already had in Madhya Pradesh and Jharkhand. So if you knew that statement, that this has happened, I was there in the Hindu, you would have been able to solve this question. But 2022. So it's for
So
new
newspaper-
entrants and new students, it does become a little more difficult as compared to those that have been following current affairs for a long time.
One thing that you can do always is the fact that you can eliminate the first option. So by that, your A, B.
Whether it's straightforward, one only, two only.
Exactly. So I think that is the way in which, even if people may not be clear about the second one, and I think students will get confused mainly with respect to the second part. If a community is declared as ST in a state, will not be one.
Even with that, you can make a lucky guess. Like the Gujars, I think in Jammu Kashmir are scheduled tribes, but the same is not there in other
A
states.
basic
like
understanding of our society. This is where social justice and Indian society comes into picture.
So if you
So even a basic understanding of the syllabus of UPSC helps a
even
student.
if you know your community, a little,
Why?
the people within your states and
Yes.
other places, you'll understand. Okay, this is one of those.
A statement based on a very general awareness about things.
General awareness.
But yes, students that have been preparing for a longer while would have this question easier as compared to those that are new.
Giving their first
First
improve.
attempt.
So newspaper reading is a must.
Newspaper reading is a must, and revision.
Even for polity and governance, I'm saying newspaper reading is a must.
True.
Next one, sir.
Next question is with respect to union budget. The first statement is Union Finance Minister on behalf of Prime Minister presents annual financial statement before both houses of the Parliament. And second is at the union level, no demand for grant can be made except on the recommendation of the President.
What about this, sir?
Dr. Saab?
President. So the first one does become easy. The point is the first one has a lot of facts. Union Finance Minister on behalf of the Prime Minister. Annual financial statement, if you know, that is the union budget.
That is the budget.
And both the houses. So does the finance minister lay it before the Rajya Sabha or not? So there's too much information, but if you know that it has to be on behalf of the president, then it does become.
I think that is the key highlighted, mentioned in the very first part under Article 112. So again, Bare Act reading comes handy here.
What about the second statement?
So even with respect to first statement, point is, I think in the parliamentary system, nothing is on behalf of the Prime Minister. So that also is something that can be where some of the students might have got it right, that this is an incorrect statement. The second is that can there be demand for grant that can be made without the exception, that is recommendation of the President?
No.
Of course, it cannot be. So one of the basic questions, I guess, with respect to polity, that
it is basic.
Yeah, it's a basic question.
I would put it easy.
It's easy question.
It's easy.
Very basic facts about annual financial statements.
And every year it comes in the news.
Money will come.
Yeah, because every time the financial statement comes, all of this is covered in the. I think Basava when he takes the classes.
True.
Yeah. Lord Basava.
So this
leaves us with
question number 43.
Okay.
The question is with respect to Speaker of Lok Sabha. There are three statements here. The question is about if at all there is a resolution that has been passed with respect to removal of Speaker of Lok Sabha. We need to consider following statements. First is it's question number 43. It says with respect to Speaker.
Oh, okay.
Right. So the question is with respect to removal of the speaker. The resolution has been moved in Lok Sabha with respect to removal of the speaker. Now the first statement is the speaker, he or she cannot preside. True or false, sir? Of course false. Of course true. He cannot preside.
He cannot preside. In this case, the deputy speaker would
Deputy speaker will need to preside. If the matter is with respect to removal, he shall not have the right to speak. Not correct. The person will have the right to defend himself. Then he shall not be entitled to vote on the resolution the person stands.
He shall be.
He shall.
Again, very students, very basic question, but directly from Article 96. Just go through the provision of 96 Clause 1 and 96 Clause 2. You'll know about both Speaker and Deputy Speaker. So you should know this.
You can take it as a power of him being an MP also. The speaker himself is a member of parliament.
He's also a member of parliament.
In that situation, if he's not performing as the speaker, he can perform as a
member of parliament.
I think where students will get confused is generally when you talk about
first
speaker,
voting as a first instance. Yes,
that you always think of speaker to be a person who will not vote and he will only act as a tiebreaker.
Yes,
right. So this is one of those. That is only situation where speaker can actually vote if the matter is with respect to removal of the speaker. And what is really interesting, I think everyone of it is at least. We know about it is the fact that if at all there is a tie, the tie will go against the speaker, right? So so that is where the question is coming from. I think only way in which a student can get confused is with respect to statement 3, if at all. But if you're a good student, I think that should not be a problem.
If you've not studied it, then what would happen is you would think then it would be a conflict of interest. If he is able to vote on his own removal, then it's a conflict of interest. And that's the exact question I get in class.
See, there's a difference.
Conflict of interest.
So, sir, there is a difference when it's the statement is saying he can preside. The word presiding is something else, and when you are voting. As sir, you said, as a member of parliament, that is something else. And this is exactly Constitution of India has very clearly prescribed that yes, he can participate. Yes, he can speak, of course. And he can vote at the first instance. This is what has been exactly presided, I think, under 96 Clause 2 particularly.
Absolutely. So it's the same with respect to Deputy Speaker. If Speaker is presiding and Deputy Speaker then is going to act as any other member of the House. The same goes the other way around. If Deputy Speaker is presiding, then Speaker essentially is going to act like any other member of the House. Only difference is, as I said, the tiebreaker is going to go against his.
It's this line I borrow from your subject. law is a very precise endeavor. So focus on the words, what they have written.
Law is a very precise endeavor, and students, whenever you're studying any basic books, try to complement it as far as possible with the bare act reading, because it will only add on to your knowledge or to your understanding. And in case you do not understand, feel free to ask your teachers.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the things that happens if you develop a habit of reading bare acts is, in many of these questions, you won't get confused. Because what happens is, bare acts is there for you to read just statements, right? But the very moment you pick up books, you start reading it.
There's the explanation, complete explanation given there.
Essentially might confuse you.
And
I think better explanations are there in NCERT from a very foundational level, I'm saying.
I also open up the constitution in class. It becomes easier because sometimes then your visual memory also kicks in.
True.
That, okay, I've read it somewhere. Or remember his sir reading it from the constitution.
Yes.
So in those ways, the memory also kicks in.
Absolutely. I think we are down to the last question now.
I think we have more.
I think
Two more.
The question is with respect to Lok Sabha. So the question is, if a bill is pending in Lok Sabha, what are the ways in which it can get lapsed? So first is with respect to when a bill is pending in Lok Sabha and Lok Sabha dissolves, will it get lapsed? Yes, it does. Right? The whole idea is that if at all there is a bill, it's a proposal by Lok Sabha, but if at all members of the Lok Sabha the Lok Sabha has lost
their majority or the completed,
it's dissolved, then you would want a new Lok Sabha which has the mandate of the people to decide on this matter. The second statement is, a bill passed by Lok Sabha and pending in Rajya Sabha lapses on dissolution of Lok Sabha.
Yeah.
Yes. Now this is where students get confused. A lot of time I see students, they feel कि sir Lok Sabha ने अगर pass कर दिया, even if you're getting a new Lok Sabha, the bill is pending in Rajya Sabha,
which is Council of States.
Exactly.
Imagine, which is the
one of
upper
the
house.
interesting things that we have is that even if a bill has been passed by Lok Sabha, it is pending in Rajya Sabha, then also such a bill can lapse because Lok Sabha has been dissolved. Now we would want new Lok Sabha to bring a fresh sort of proposal about it.
Yeah.
Interesting thing again is the joint sitting aspect of it. That is, if at all there is a bill which has been passed by one house and President has asked for joint sitting to happen, the bill will not lapse even if Lok Sabha gets dissolved, right? And that is the third statement. A bill in regard to which the President of India notified his or her intent to summon the House to a joint sitting lapses on the dissolution of Lok Sabha. No, it doesn't. Right? And so that is where it is interesting.
Very straightforward.
It's straightforward.
If you did your foundation well, you would be able to answer. It's not a difficult question.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter whether you're first time or giving it for the fourth time. If you've done foundation well, you'll be able to answer.
One of the things I do in the class whenever we are doing this topic, I just actually make a proper diagram in which I'm just trying to explain all the scenarios.
It helps with mind maps.
क्या होगा, ये होगा तो क्या होगा, ये होगा तो क्या होगा. So yeah, easy question I would imagine, right? What do you think is the reason why this question was asked, sir?
Current
Lok Sabha dissolution, yeah.
Right. So there were a number of bills that were pending in Lok Sabha that of course gets dissolved and that will need to be reintroduced again, right?
There's also one statement. If it's pending before the Committee on Government Assurances, I remember two. Joint sitting one and the Committee on Government Assurances. So everywhere else you can give that before that.
So coming to the last question, sir. I think that was on prorogation. Yeah.
The question is with respect to how exactly House can be prorogued. I think the basic is of course that we know in order to summon the House or in order to prorogue the House, it will be on the order of the President, but then President will take it on the advice of Prime Minister and Council of Ministers, right? Council of Ministers headed by the Prime Minister. So the question is, prorogation of a House by the President of India does not require advice of Council of Ministers? Of course not.
It does.
Right?
Because it's not a discretionary power of the President. Very straight away. President has been very few.
A prorogation of a House is generally done after the House is adjourned, sine die, but there is no bar to the President of India prorogating the House which is in session. Well, on the face of it, the statement is absolutely true. There's nothing wrong in it. Only thing is the way in which sine die happens, right? So the way in which the question is given, I think it is beyond doubt the statement is true, right? Then, yes.
No,
What
even
are
if the speaker doesn't urgent sign that, the president can prorogue the house. It's not.
Then
So that makes a third statement also.
yes.
This is the same thing, no?
No, dissolution of the
Okay.
Lok Sabha is done by the president,
Achha,
who,
achha.
save in exceptional circumstances, does on the advice of Council of Ministers. Yes, right. Idea is it will be done by
Elimination.
by the president on the advice of Prime Minister and Council of Ministers.
Actually, even with the exceptional circumstances, I think that is. I don't think it's taught also. So
This one?
you don't find it in Lakshmikant and other.
What is the
places.
exceptional circumstance?
Yeah.
The exceptional circumstances, sir. No, it has happened. It was one of the judgments of Supreme Court. I'm forgetting the year. The idea was that if at all your Prime Minister who has lost the majority in Lok Sabha advises to the President that President, I recommend you to please dissolve Lok Sabha. President can take upon this to be a malified advice, and that is not binding on the President. President can then endeavor to figure out if there is any other coalition that can get the majority. Exactly. So that is that exceptional circumstance in which President can choose that is to dissolve the house, or for that matter go against the advice given by Council of Ministers. That is the idea. So yep, what do you think, sir? Easy, tough, moderate?
Moderate.
How about you, sir?
Yes. The paper in itself, Polity.
Overall paper itself, through 2-3 questions, of course, there would be. UPSC can't just, serve in the platter, but.
So if you go back, say 10 years, 12 years, there used to be a number of questions on the parliament. So this is one of those classic questions that UPSC always used to ask question with respect to parliamentary proceedings, adjournment motion, no confidence motion, that kind of, right?
If you did foundation well, you'll be able to answer. And plus QIP, I don't think any of the questions would be difficult. Yes, one question here and there would be difficult based on.
And that will be in every subject. That will be in every subject.
And you have to do every. If you only think that I can qualify with economy or polity,
no, not possible.
No, it's not possible. You have to do all of them. Some subjects may be harder, some easier, but all the 4, at least the core subjects, have to be done. So that on that exception thing also, I think in the 7th and 10th Lok Sabha, the recommendation was actually also given by the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs.
Okay.
So if you in the Lok Sabha rules, it's actually there that only in those 2 sessions, the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs actually gave the recommendations to dissolve the Lok Sabha. I think that is also an exceptional circumstance. Twice it happened.